named souls come closer. You've been quiet for too long, haven't you? Not weak, not broken, just quiet. The kind of quiet that makes people nervous. The kind of quiet that makes fake people start talking too much. The kind of quiet that makes guilty people start twitching when you walk into a room. And now they're confused. Now they're looking around at the smoke, at the ash, at the panic crawling up their throat, and they keep saying the same thing over and over. You didn't even do anything. Exactly. That's the part destroying them. Because they built their whole little fantasy around the idea that if something went wrong in their life, it had to be you. If their peace disappeared, it had to be because you cursed it. If their image cracked, it had to be because you touched it. If their plan failed, if their lies got exposed, if their circle turned cold, if their money moved funny, if their sleep got ugly, if their confidence started rotting from the inside out, they needed your fingerprints on it. They needed you to be the villain so they could avoid looking in the mirror. That's how cowards survive. They don't face consequences. They cast characters. They hand out roles. Savior, victim, monster, problem, threat. And the second you stop performing the role they wrote for you, their whole script catches fire. That's what they never tell you. People are comfortable with your pain when it helps them stay innocent. They love the version of you that's always explaining yourself, always defending yourself, always shrinking, always trying to be understood, always trying to make everybody comfortable, always cleaning up a mess you didn't make. That version of you made them feel powerful. That version of you was easy to manage, easy to guilt, easy to blame, easy to use. But then something happened. You got tired. Not dramatic tired. Not social media tired. Not fake deep, post a quote, and disappear for 2 hours tired. I'm talking about that real tired. That dangerous tired. That soul-level exhaustion where something in you stops begging, stops chasing, stops clarifying, stops trying to win over people who already decided to misunderstand you because misunderstanding you was convenient. And when that switch flips, everything changes. Not because you attacked them, because you detached. That's what burns people. Your silence did what your anger never could. Your absence exposed what your presence used to cover. Your withdrawal made people face the ugliness they kept blaming on your energy. See, some people were never reacting to what you did. They were reacting to what your existence revealed. Your discipline reminded them they were lazy. Your resilience reminded them they were soft. Your self-control reminded them they were sloppy. Your potential irritated every part of them that settled. Your presence made their performance feel cheap, and they hated you for it. Not openly at first. People like that rarely come direct. They smile, they joke, they act cool. They say, "I'm proud of you," with that weird tightness in their face. They clap with dead hands. They compliment you like it physically hurts. They throw little slick comments, tiny poison darts, just enough to test whether you notice. Oh, you noticed. You just stopped reacting, and that drove them insane. Because manipulative people survive on access, not love. Access. Access to your attention, access to your energy, access to your self-doubt, access to your need to explain, access to your guilt, access to your softness. Once that access is gone, they start malfunctioning. Now suddenly you're different. Now suddenly you're cold. Now suddenly you act funny. No, you just stopped being easy to drain. You stopped handing out pieces of your spirit to people who only showed up hungry. And now everything around them feels unstable. because they don't have your light to steal anymore. Listen carefully. Some fires are not revenge. Some fires are revelation. A building doesn't collapse because you looked at it. It collapses because the foundation was trash. A relationship doesn't die because you went quiet. It dies because the connection was being held together by your effort alone. A group doesn't split because you stepped back. It splits because your presence was the glue holding fake people together. A liar doesn't get exposed because you cursed them. They get exposed because lies are heavy, and eventually everything heavy starts sinking. That's why they're panicking. Not because you did something, because you stopped doing everything for everyone. And once you did that, reality started collecting debts. That's the word right there, debts. Everybody loves shortcuts until the bill comes. Everybody loves fake loyalty until pressure enters the room. Everybody loves using good-hearted people until those good-hearted people finally develop standards. Then all of a sudden the vibe changes. Then all of a sudden the masks start slipping. Then all of a sudden everybody's going through a lot. No kidding. Because when truth starts moving through people's lives, it doesn't knock politely. It kicks doors in. It drags hidden motives into daylight. It makes people hear themselves. It makes them sit with all the ugliness they kept outsourcing. And some of them can't handle that. That's why they keep trying to make you feel responsible for the chaos they created. They want you to come back and absorb it. They want you to re-enter the room and become the emotional sponge again. They want your presence because your presence gave them somewhere to dump their dysfunction. Without you, they have to hold their own poison. Without you, they have to hear their own thoughts. Without you, they have to face the fact that maybe the problem was never your aura, your tone, your boundaries, your growth, your confidence, your silence, your ambition, your standards, your honesty, your refusal to play dumb. Maybe the problem was them, and that realization is a brutal thing, because once a person sees that the destruction in their life is tied to their own envy, their own lies, their own greed, their own arrogance, their own cruelty, their own weird obsession with controlling people who were never theirs to control. They have two options. They can change, or they can hate you harder. Most choose hate first. It's easier. Growth requires ego death. Blame only requires a mouth. So they talk, they whisper, they speculate, they build stories. They act like detectives in a case with no evidence. They replay your name in rooms you're not even in. They keep checking what you're doing. They keep watching, keep comparing, keep tracking, keep hoping you fall so they can finally feel normal again. And every day you don't break, they crack a little more. Every day you move with peace, it bothers them. Every day you stay focused, it bothers them. Every day you refuse to respond, it bothers them. Every day you glow without permission, it bothers them, because they wanted your life to fall apart after they mishandled you. That was the fantasy. They thought pain would silence you. They thought betrayal would ruin your confidence. They thought isolation would make you desperate. They thought being overlooked would make you smaller. They thought losing support would make you fold. Instead, it built something terrifying. You got sharper. You got calmer. You got harder to read. You stopped wearing your wounds on your face. You stopped announcing your pain to people who secretly enjoyed hearing about it. You stopped turning private battles into public content for spectators. You learned how to bleed in silence and build in private. That kind of transformation scares people, because now they can't predict you. The old version of you was transparent. The new version of you is intentional, and intentional people are dangerous to anyone who depends on confusion. Say that to yourself. You are dangerous to anybody who depends on your confusion. Anybody who needed you insecure is in trouble now. Anybody who fed off your people-pleasing is in trouble now. Anybody who benefited from your low standards is in trouble now. Anybody who called your kindness weakness is in trouble now. Anybody who thought your patience meant you wouldn't eventually evolve is in trouble now. That is why everything looks like it's burning around them. Not because you lit the match, because your growth removed the illusion. And illusions die loud. Have you noticed that? Fake love gets loud when it's losing control. Fake friends get loud when access is denied. Fake supporters get loud when they can't claim you. Fake mentors get loud when you outgrow them. Fake lovers get loud when they realize you can survive without closure. The loudness is not power, it's panic. Real power doesn't need a campaign. Real power doesn't need 10 side conversations and a dramatic caption. Real power moves in silence and lets reality speak. That's what your life is doing right now. Speaking, without begging, without forcing, without proving. And that is tearing certain people apart. Because they expected a breakdown, but instead they got a witness. Your life became proof that they didn't break you. Do you understand how insulting that is to a manipulator? To throw everything at somebody and still watch them rise. To lie on them and still watch them become more respected. To isolate them and still watch them become more centered. To withhold love and still watch them become more radiant. That kind of outcome humiliates darkness, and darkness hates embarrassment. That's why people get reckless after they fail to destroy you. They start oversharing, overreacting, picking random fights, projecting, turning everybody against everybody, ruining opportunities with their own attitude, self-sabotaging in broad daylight. And the funniest part? They still want to act like you did something mystical. No. What happened was simple. The rot became visible. That's it. Your non-participation forced exposure. Your boundaries forced clarity. Your detachment forced consequences. Your discipline forced comparison. Your healing forced truth. You became a mirror they could not stand looking into. And mirrors don't attack. They reveal. That's why some people hate being around healed energy. Because healed energy does not cooperate with delusion. Healed energy doesn't chase mixed signals, doesn't romanticize disrespect, doesn't over-explain basic boundaries, doesn't keep auditioning for human decency, doesn't keep reopening doors that almost killed them emotionally. Healed energy says no without writing an essay. Healed energy leaves when the pattern repeats. Healed energy understands that closure is not always a conversation. Sometimes closure is distance. Sometimes closure is watching people become strangers. Sometimes closure is letting the truth wear their face without your help. And yes, that hurts. Let's not fake that part. It hurts when people swear they love you, then compete with you. It hurts when people claim they support you, then shrink when your name rises. It hurts when people ask what's wrong, not because they care, but because they want details. It hurts when people act like your growth is arrogance because they preferred you available and wounded. It hurts when loyalty gets answered with convenience. It hurts when your pure intentions get twisted by people with dirty motives. That pain is real, but so is the lesson. And the lesson is priceless. Not everybody who loses access to you lost something good. Some people lost control. Some people lost a resource. Some people lost a free therapist. Some people lost a backup plan. Some people lost an emotional battery pack. Some people lost somebody they thought would tolerate anything forever. That's why they're angry. Not because you changed for the worse, because you changed in a way that no longer benefits their dysfunction. And let me tell you something nobody says enough. You do not owe your softness to people who studied it just to weaponize it. You do not owe endless understanding to people who kept misunderstanding you on purpose. You do not owe explanations to people committed to twisting every word. You do not owe presents to people who only appreciate you when you're suffering. You do not owe loyalty to people who vanish the second you stop being useful. And you definitely do not owe guilt because their life started shaking after you stopped carrying their chaos for them. Read that in your spirit. Their shaking is not your guilt. Their downfall is not always your doing. Sometimes people fall apart because they built themselves out of borrowed energy, fake confidence, imitation strength, and performance love. And when the source dries up, the structure caves in. You were the source in more situations than you even realize. Your encouragement kept people going. Your presence stabilized rooms. Your loyalty made people feel chosen. Your forgiveness gave people extra chances they never earned. Your energy carried weak dynamics way past their expiration date. So when you withdrew, the hidden weakness showed itself fast. That's why it feels so sudden to them. But you know better. You know it was not sudden. You know this was building for a while. You saw the cracks. You felt the weird energy. You caught the fake smiles. You noticed how support got quieter as you got stronger. You noticed how some people only called when they needed comfort, attention, resources, validation, strategy, healing, grounding. You noticed. You just stopped arguing with what you felt. That is one of the highest forms of self-respect. To stop debating your own intuition just because the truth is inconvenient. To stop gaslighting yourself because someone has a sad story. To stop explaining away patterns that keep repeating. To stop calling betrayal a misunderstanding. To stop calling envy bad communication. To stop calling disrespect stress. To stop calling emotional neglect they're just busy. No. At some point, wisdom enters the room and says enough. Enough trying to decode what was already clear. Enough bleeding for people who can't even hand you a bandage. Enough carrying atmospheres that collapse the second you rest. Enough shrinking your fire so insecure people can feel tall. Enough. And once you say enough with your whole soul, not just your mouth, your life starts reorganizing. People leave, masks fall, conversations get shorter, rooms feel colder, certain invitations disappear, some opportunities vanish. At first it feels lonely, then it feels clean. That clean feeling, that's power returning to your body. That's your nervous system finally realizing it doesn't have to live on alert for people who call chaos chemistry. That's your spirit unclenching. That's your mind clearing out the noise of constant emotional trespassing. That's you becoming available for your actual destiny instead of babysitting grown people who refuse to grow. And let's talk about destiny for a second, because people love to think destiny looks soft. It doesn't. Sometimes destiny looks like loss, looks like separation, looks like betrayal exposing your standards, looks like being pushed out of spaces too small for your next form. looks like being talked about by people who can feel you leaving them behind, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Sometimes destiny looks like being misunderstood on the way to becoming undeniable. That's where many of you are right now. Not cursed, not forgotten, not delayed because you failed. Just being stripped of everything that can't come where you're going. And stripping seasons are ugly. They're not aesthetic. They don't come with perfect lighting and a deep quote under a selfie. They come with confusion, with tears, with unanswered texts, with late-night overthinking, with that sick feeling in your chest when you realize people you would have protected were quietly rooting for your collapse. That hurts different because it changes how you see the world, but it also changes how you see yourself. You stop begging for crumbs. You stop glorifying bare minimum behavior. You stop mistaking familiarity for safety. You stop letting your empathy volunteer you for more suffering. You become selective, precise, grounded, calm in a way that makes loud people uncomfortable. And when you become that, you stop fearing who leaves, because you finally understand something. Anything that needed your self-abandonment to survive deserved to die. Anything that only worked while you were doubting yourself deserved to burn. Anything that punished you for evolving deserved to lose access. Anything that grew stronger while you grew weaker was never love. That's not bitterness. That's discernment. Big difference. Bitterness keeps you chained to the wound. Discernment teaches you where not to bleed again. And you need that now. Because where you're going, your energy matters too much to waste. Your mind matters too much to clutter. Your future matters too much to hand to people who think your softness is a public resource. No more. Let them wonder why things are burning down. Let them ask questions. Let them replay old conversations. Let them try to connect dots that all lead back to their own choices. Let them sit in the smoke of every game they thought they'd never have to answer for. You stay focused. You stay dangerous in the right way. Not reckless, not cruel, not obsessed with revenge. Too many people destroy themselves, trying to make sure everybody knows they were wronged. That's low-level power. High-level power is building a life so solid that the people who mishandled you have to watch from a distance and realize they lost access to something rare. High-level power is peace. High-level power is emotional discipline. High-level power is not answering every provocation. High-level power is letting people reveal themselves all the way. High-level power is keeping your mouth closed while your life gets louder. That is where your reward is. Not in the argument, not in the comeback, not in the fantasy of everybody apologizing in one dramatic scene. Some never will. Some are too proud, too small, too committed to their own fake image, too allergic to accountability. Forget the apology. Build the evidence. Build the body. Build the mind. Build the money. Build the routine. Build the standards. Build the peace. Build the life that makes old confusion look embarrassing. Because the truth is, the strongest thing about you was never your ability to survive chaos. It was your ability to stop normalizing it. That is evolution. That is power. That is why their world feels unstable now. Because you were the one thing in it that was real. And once reality walked out, everything counterfeit started overheating. So let it. Let every weak structure collapse. Let every lie get heavy. Let every hidden motive grow teeth and bite the person feeding it. Let every fake bond disintegrate under the weight of truth. Let every room that needed your dimming go dark without you. You are not here to rescue broken systems built on your silence. You are not here to keep broken people comfortable at the expense of your future. You are not here to shrink so corrupt hearts can feel clean. You are here to become so aligned, so disciplined, so emotionally unshakable that chaos can no longer rent space in your spirit. To the ones who've felt the room shift the second they walked in, to the ones who know what it's like to be watched, judged, studied, and quietly resented before even opening their mouth, this one is for you. You've felt it, haven't you? That weird energy, that strange tension, that little change in people's faces when you enter the space. The fake smiles get tighter. The jokes get sharper, the whispers get lower, the eyes stay on you a little too long. The vibe changes, and nobody says it out loud, but your gut says the same thing every single time. Something about you bothers them, and that's the part that used to confuse you. Because you weren't even trying to do anything. You weren't chasing attention. You weren't begging to be seen. Half the time, you were just trying to survive the day, keep your head down, handle your business, and get home without your mind falling apart. But somehow, out of everybody in the crowd, they still found you. They still picked you. They still studied you. They still threw weird energy your way. They still tried to test you, provoke you, discredit you, isolate you, embarrass you, misread you, humble you, and make you doubt yourself. And for a long time, you took it personally in the worst way. You thought maybe something was wrong with you. Maybe you were too awkward, too quiet, too intense, too different, too damaged, too much, too hard to control, too hard to predict, too hard to categorize. And that right there, that was your first mistake, because the truth is way darker than that. They didn't target you because you were weak. They targeted you because something about you made them uncomfortable. Scary, uncomfortable. You carry something most people lost a long time ago. Presence. That's right. Presence. Not popularity, not status, not fake confidence. Presence. That thing you can't buy. That thing you can't copy from some self-help clip. That thing that doesn't need to scream to be felt. Some people walk into a room and nobody notices. You walk in, and even when you say nothing, insecure souls start rearranging themselves. And you know what's wild? A lot of them won't even understand why they're reacting to you. They'll just feel it. Your energy exposes them. Your silence makes them talk too much. Your self-control makes them look sloppy. Your honesty makes their performance look cheap. Your resilience makes their excuses sound pathetic. And that scares people, especially people who built their whole identity on being the loudest, the most manipulative, the most liked, the most feared, the most connected, the most polished little fraud in the building. Because when you show up carrying pain, but still standing straight, carrying scars but still seeing clearly, carry a disappointment but still refusing to bow, you become a mirror. And insecure people hate mirrors. They don't want truth. They want comfort. They want control. They want a world where nobody reminds them of what they're not. Then here you come, not perfect, not untouched, not soft and shiny and manufactured for applause. No, you come in real, and real is terrifying to fake people. That's why they poke at you. That's why they bait you. That's why they randomly act cold. That's why they switch up. That's why some people support everybody except you. That's why your mistakes get magnified while everybody else gets grace. That's why they act like your confidence is arrogance. Your boundaries are attitude. Your ambition is selfishness. Your silence is hostility. Your pain is drama. Your standards are unrealistic. Your refusal to be used is somehow disrespectful. Funny how that works, isn't it? When you let people walk over you, they call you sweet. The second you stand up straight, now you're difficult. Now you've changed. Now you think you're better. No. You just stopped volunteering to be a doormat. And people who benefited from your self-doubt will always have a problem with your growth. Read that again in your soul. The people who felt safest when you were confused will panic when you become clear. The people who loved the version of you that apologized for existing will feel threatened by the version of you that finally understands their value. The people who could handle you when you were broken, scattered, begging for crumbs, and desperate for validation will not know what to do with the version of you that can walk away. That's the scary reason. You are not easy to own anymore. You are not easy to manipulate anymore. You are not easy to label anymore. And the system around you, whether it's a family, friend group, workplace, relationship, church circle, social scene, or whatever little emotional prison you've been standing in, the system hates what it cannot predict. Let's be real. Most people do not love freedom. They love familiar cages. They love rules they understand. They love people. They can summarize in one sentence. Oh, she's the quiet one. Oh, he's the weak one. Oh, that's the people pleaser. Oh, that one always comes back. Oh, that one can be guilt-tripped. Oh, that one can be controlled through fear. And then one day, you stop fitting the script. You stop reacting on schedule. You stop chasing people who disrespect you. You stop over-explaining. You stop proving your innocence to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop shrinking so insecure people can feel taller. And now, everybody's confused. Now everybody's uncomfortable. Now everybody wants to know what happened to you. I'll tell you what happened. Pain educated you. Loneliness trained you. Betrayal sharpened you. Disappointment woke you up. Silence built your inner world. Rejection forced you to meet yourself. You didn't just suffer. You learned. That's what makes you dangerous. Because suffering by itself doesn't make somebody powerful. Plenty of people suffer and become bitter, needy, reckless, cruel, or permanently stuck. But you paid attention. You started connecting dots. You started noticing patterns. You started hearing what people meant instead of just what they said. You started seeing how fake concern hides control, how compliments hide jealousy, how help sometimes comes with chains attached, how attention isn't always love, how being chosen isn't always an honor, how being included can be another form of being used. And once you start seeing like that, really seeing, people can feel it on you. They can feel that you're harder to fool now. That smile they use on everybody else doesn't work the same on you. That guilt trip doesn't hit the same anymore. That little power game doesn't make you fold like it used to. That fake apology doesn't melt you. That public disrespect doesn't automatically make you break. That emotional blackmail doesn't own your nervous system like before. You became expensive, not in money, in access, in energy, in emotional labor, in mental space. And broke souls hate expensive access. They want cheap entry into your heart, cheap entry into your time, cheap entry into your mind. cheap entry into your boundaries, cheap entry into your loyalty, and when they realize they have to come correct now, they call you cold. No, you're calibrated. You're no longer handing sacred things to unserious people. And yes, that will make some enemies good. Some enemies are proof that your life is no longer available for public misuse. Some tension is evidence that your standards are working. Some distance is the price of self-respect. You've got to stop thinking every rejection is a tragedy. Some doors slam because something rotten is behind them. Some people disappear because your spirit stopped giving them free food. Some rooms go quiet because truth entered and the performance got awkward. That doesn't mean you lost. That means the filter is doing its job. And let me get even darker with you. Sometimes they target you before you fully know who you are, because they recognize the threat before you do. That's right. Sometimes insecure people sniff out your potential while you're still doubting it. Sometimes jealous people see your future while you're still crying over your past. Sometimes manipulators know you're one healed decision away from becoming unreachable. So what do? They attack early. They plant confusion early. They question your worth early. They make you second-guess your instincts early. They keep you busy with drama so you never build discipline. They keep you addicted to approval so you never discover authority. They keep you emotionally exhausted so you never become focused. Because a focused version of you, that's a problem. A healed version of you, that's a problem. A disciplined version of you, that's a disaster for anybody who built comfort on your weakness. Imagine how many people were only comfortable because you were underestimating yourself. Imagine how many dynamics only survived because you kept betraying your own instincts. Imagine how many people called you crazy just to keep you from becoming accurate. That's why your growth feels lonely. You're not just changing habits. You're breaking contracts nobody admitted existed. You're breaking invisible agreements. The agreement to stay small. The agreement to stay available. The agreement to stay confused. The agreement to stay easy to shame. The agreement to stay grateful for crumbs. The agreement to keep calling disrespect love. Because at least it came with company. And every time you break one of those agreements, somebody gets nervous. Because every insecure structure around you depends on your compliance. That's why the targeting intensifies when you get serious. Have you noticed that? The second you start minding your business, building discipline, getting quieter, getting sharper, protecting your peace, learning new skills, taking your healing seriously, not chasing chaos anymore, the weird energy increases. Suddenly people check in more. Suddenly people misinterpret you more. Suddenly your name is in rooms you didn't enter. Suddenly there's tension with people who used to ignore you. Why? Because your silence started sounding like power. Your withdrawal started looking like clarity. Your discipline started exposing their laziness. Your self-respect started reminding them of every boundary they never had the courage to set. And now they want to drag you back into noise, back into proving, back into arguing, back into the mud. Because if they can get you emotional enough, reactive enough, distracted enough, guilty enough, they can delay your evolution. That's the game. And some of you have been losing years to that game. Not because you're stupid, not because you're weak, because you have a heart, because you wanted to believe people meant well, because you confused empathy with obligation, because you were raised to keep peace at your own expense, because part of you still thought being understood by everyone was necessary. Listen carefully. Not everybody deserves an explanation. Not everybody deserves front row seats to your transformation. Not everybody deserves access to the new version of you. And not every attack deserves a response. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is let people talk to the version of you that no longer exists. Let them gossip about the old you. Let them rehearse outdated narratives. Let them laugh at a chapter you already burned. Let them think you're falling apart while you're actually rebuilding in private. Privacy confuses people who need constant visibility to feel important. Power grows quietly. Real power, anyway. The loudest people in the room are often terrified of silence, because silence forces them to hear themselves. But you were trained there. You met yourself there. You bled there. You rebuilt there. That's why you don't need as much noise anymore. And that itself is terrifying, because a person who no longer needs applause becomes very hard to control. A person who can stand alone becomes very hard to threaten. A person who has already survived abandonment becomes very hard to manipulate with distance. A person who has made peace with being misunderstood becomes very hard to shame. That is why they targeted you. Not because you're worthless, because your value is difficult to neutralize. You've been reading their hostility backward. Their obsession was never proof that you were nothing. It was proof that something in you refused to bow the way they expected. And let's talk about the part nobody says out loud. Sometimes the reason they target you is because your existence gives other people permission to wake up. That's the scary part. It's not just about you. It's about what happens around you. When one person stops tolerating disrespect, other people start noticing they don't have to tolerate it either. When one person gets honest, the whole fake environment starts shaking. When one person refuses to clap for lies, the performance starts losing power. When one person breaks the emotional cycle, the system has to either evolve or attack the threat. And most broken systems don't evolve. They attack. Families do it. Friend groups do it. Workplaces do it. Communities do it. Industries do it. Even relationships do it. You start growing, and instead of celebrating you, they study how to humble you. Because your freedom exposes their chains. Your discipline exposes their excuses. Your self-respect exposes their desperation. Your authenticity exposes their costume. And if they cannot become what you remind them to be, they will try to punish you for the reminder. This is why you need discernment more than validation. You need vision more than applause. You need self-trust more than group acceptance. You need peace more than being liked. Because a lot of people will clap for you as long as your growth remains decorative, as long as it's cute, as long as it fits their comfort, as long as it doesn't cost them anything, as long as your healing still leaves room for their access, as long as your glow stays manageable. But the second your growth starts changing your standards, your schedule, your relationships, your mouth, your patience, your tolerance, your ambition, your non-negotiables. Now it's a problem. Now you're different. Yeah, that's the point. You were supposed to change. You were supposed to get sharper. You were supposed to outgrow places that only knew how to feed on your confusion. You were supposed to become unfamiliar to people who only recognized the wounded version of you. Stop apologizing for the distance your healing creates. Stop apologizing for outgrowing dysfunction. Stop apologizing for getting harder to fool. Stop apologizing for becoming someone your old environment can't digest. That discomfort around you is not always a sign to shrink. Sometimes it's a sign you're finally carrying your true weight. And carrying your true weight will absolutely shake weak structures. A light version of you was easier for them. A doubting version of you was easier for them. A begging version of you was easier for them. A people-pleasing version of you was easier for them. But this version, the one that watches more than it talks, the one that files the energy before it trusts the words, the one that can love deeply without abandoning itself, the one that can forgive without reconnecting, the one that can care without rescuing, the one that can leave without making a scene, the one that knows the difference between being needed and being valued. That version of you is a nightmare for users, abusers, pretenders, copycats, liars, cowards, and emotional parasites. Good. Let them be uncomfortable. You spent too many years being the uncomfortable one in rooms full of frauds. Let the pressure change sides. Let the people who weaponized confusion choke on your clarity. Let the people who played with your mind realize the game expired. Let the people who kept trying to reduce you to your lowest moment meet the version of you that turned pain into precision. You don't need revenge the way they think you do. Sometimes your revenge is becoming unrecognizable to the forces that tried to define you. Sometimes your revenge is a calm nervous system, a clear mind, a disciplined routine, a private life, selective access, real peace, real standards, real progress that hits harder than rage ever could. Because rage is easy to dismiss. But your composure, your focus, your refusal to collapse, that keeps them awake. Nothing confuses your enemies more than watching you become fruitful in the exact place they expected you to decay. Nothing bothers manipulative people more than realizing your pain made you wiser instead of easier. Nothing irritates insecure people more than watching you glow without asking their permission. So no. Don't waste your life trying to convince everybody you're harmless. You're not harmless. Not to lies. Not to manipulation. Not to weak excuses. Not to false power. Not to dead environments that survive by draining the alive. And that does not make you evil. It makes you necessary. Some people were not sent into this world to blend. Some people were not designed for shallow peace. Some people were built to disrupt false order just by telling the truth with their life. That's why your path feels intense. That's why ordinary advice doesn't always fit. That's why pretending never sat right in your chest. That's why fake friendships exhaust you. That's why shallow conversations leave you empty. That's why certain rooms make your spirit itch. You can feel when something is off. You can feel when somebody's energy is coated in performance. You can feel when love is mixed with possession. You can feel when help comes with hidden debt. You can feel when a compliment has teeth in it. That sensitivity is not your weakness. It's your radar. It only became painful because you were taught to distrust it. You were taught to call it overthinking. You were taught to call it insecurity. You were taught to call it being dramatic. But now, you know better. Your body was catching what your mind had not yet learned how to explain. Your spirit was ringing alarms before your logic could write a report. And every time you ignored those alarms to keep the peace, you paid for it. Enough giving the benefit of the doubt to patterns that keep cutting you. Enough forcing yourself to stay where your soul is getting smaller. Enough explaining your heart to people who profit from misunderstanding it. Enough trying to look chill in situations that are clearly corrosive. Enough calling your self-betrayal maturity. Enough calling your silence strength when it's really fear. Real strength is not suppressing what you know. Real strength is acting on it. Real strength is leaving when the pattern becomes clear. Real strength is setting the boundary before the breakdown. Real strength is saying no without writing a whole thesis. Real strength is choosing long-term peace over short-term approval. And yes, it will cost you. It may cost you comfort. It may cost you connections. It may cost you certain identities. It may cost you the version of yourself that survived by adapting to nonsense. Let it cost. What's the alternative? Staying target practice forever? Staying emotionally available to people who secretly resent your light? Staying loyal to spaces that only clap when you're smaller than your calling? No. You've done enough dying in places that were never built to hold your soul. Now it's time to become selective. Selective with your words. Selective with your energy. Selective with your trust. Selective with your attention. Because attention is currency, and too many of you are still funding the very things that are draining you. Starve what feeds on your confusion. Feed what strengthens your mind. Feed what sharpens your discipline. Feed what protects your peace. Feed what makes you more rooted, more honest, more dangerous in the healthiest possible way. Dangerous in truth. Dangerous in discernment. Dangerous in self-respect. Dangerous in focus. Dangerous in emotional sobriety. Dangerous in the way you stop begging and start building. Dangerous in the way you no longer need permission to become who you were always supposed to be. That is the shift. That is the turn. To the ones who walked through fire and somehow came out breathing, this one is for you. They're angry because you survived what destroyed them. Let that land, not because you cheated, not because life was easy on you, not because somebody handed you a map, a safety net, a lucky break, or some magical shortcut. No. They're angry because you took the same pain that folded them in half, and you kept moving. You took the same betrayal, the same abandonment, the same humiliation, the same sleepless nights, the same disrespect, the same cold silence from people who swore they loved you, the same pressure, the same loneliness, the same dark thoughts, the same war in your head, and somehow, you're still here, breathing, thinking, building, climbing, still dangerous. And that bothers people more than you realize, because your survival is not just your survival. It is evidence. Evidence that excuses are weaker than discipline. Evidence that pain does not get the final word. Evidence that being broken is not the same thing as being finished. Evidence that a person can be dragged through hell and still come out with a sharper mind, colder standards, stronger boundaries, and a soul that refuses to kneel. That's what makes them uncomfortable. Your existence exposes something in them they've been trying to hide. Because every time they look at you, they don't just see you. They see what they could have become if they had decided to fight instead of fold. That's the part nobody says out loud. Most people are not upset by your pain. They understand pain. Pain is common. Pain is everywhere. Everybody can relate to pain. What they can't handle is your response to it. That's what shakes them. They can process your struggle. They can even pity your struggle. They might clap for you when you're down. They might even love you when you look weak, confused, uncertain, easy to control. But the second you rise with scars on your face and purpose in your chest, different story. Now you're a threat. Now you're not entertaining anymore. Now you're not easy to manage. Now you're not the person begging for crumbs. Now you're not the one apologizing for taking up space. Now you're not asking permission to exist. Now you're not shrinking so fragile egos can feel tall. Now you're walking different, talking different, thinking different, choosing different, and people feel it. They feel that something in you died, not your spirit, your fear, that version of you that used to over-explain, that version of you that used to chase closure from people who enjoyed watching you bleed, that version of you that kept trying to prove your worth to people who already decided to misunderstand you, that version of you that kept calling disrespect a misunderstanding, that version of you that confused loyalty with self-abandonment. That version is gone. And some people miss that version because they could use that version. They could manipulate that version, guilt-trip that version, ignore that version, use that version when they were bored, lonely, broke, desperate, or needing attention. That version was convenient. But this version sees through everything. You hear the fake concern in their voice. You catch the hidden disrespect in the joke. You notice the energy shift when you stop being available. You recognize when someone wants access to your heart, but has no intention of protecting it. You can feel when a room goes weird because your confidence just exposed everybody's mask. That kind of awareness doesn't come from reading cute quotes online. It comes from surviving things that were supposed to erase you. It comes from being left alone in moments where you truly needed someone. It comes from crying in silence because you knew nobody around you had the emotional depth to hold what you were carrying. It comes from staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m. with your chest tight, your head loud, and your whole soul asking one question: how much more of this am I supposed to take? And still getting up the next day, still showing up, still working, still smiling when you had every reason not to, still trying when your heart was exhausted, still carrying responsibilities while your inner world was collapsing, still functioning while breaking, still surviving without applause. That changes a person, not in a soft, poetic way, in a brutal way, in a real way, in the kind of way where you stop expecting fairness, you stop worshiping comfort, you stop believing everybody who says, "Trust me." You stop handing your energy to people just because they know the right words. Pain taught you pattern recognition. Pain taught you that not everybody who hugs you loves you. Not everybody who praises you supports you. Not everybody who says, "I'm here for you," can actually handle your truth. Some people only like you when you are easy to digest. But you are not easy to digest anymore. You became heavy, not in a bad way, in a powerful way. You carry depth now, weight, presence, a kind of silence that says you have seen too much to be impressed by surface-level nonsense. And that energy terrifies shallow people. Because shallow people need noise, they need attention, they need image, they need the performance, they need to look strong because they are not strong. They need the spotlight because they have never built a light inside themselves. You don't need all that anymore. Because when you have survived the kind of darkness that almost took your name from you, external validation starts feeling cheap. You stop caring about who claps. You start caring about who is real. You stop chasing popularity. You start chasing peace. You stop asking, do they like me? You start asking, do they deserve access to me? That shift right there, that shift changes everything. Because now you're not reacting from wounds, you're responding from wisdom. And wisdom has a different smell, different rhythm, different temperature. It walks into rooms and doesn't need to announce itself. It doesn't beg to be chosen. It doesn't panic when ignored. It doesn't collapse when misunderstood. It knows who it is. It knows what it survived. It knows the cost of becoming. It knows how much blood, grief, discipline, heartbreak, restraint, and internal warfare it took to build this version. That's why you don't play with yourself anymore. You don't betray yourself to keep people comfortable. You don't water yourself down so insecure people can feel less threatened. You don't perform weakness to make broken minds feel powerful. You don't hand out loyalty where there is no reciprocity. You don't keep bleeding just because somebody got used to drinking from your wounds. No. Now you choose yourself with no apology. And let's be honest, that makes a lot of people furious. Because your healing removed their access. Your boundaries ruined their old strategy. Your self-respect destroyed their control. Your silence broke their script. Your discipline made their excuses look embarrassing. Your growth exposed how committed they are to staying the same. That's why some people get cold when you get better. They won't say it like that, of course. They'll act distant, passive-aggressive, weird, suddenly too busy, suddenly critical, suddenly unimpressed by things they used to praise, suddenly allergic to your presence. But what's really happening is simple. Your rise is confronting their stagnation, and some people would rather resent your transformation than admit their own cowardice, because it takes courage to face yourself. It takes courage to stop blaming the world for what you keep refusing to fix. It takes courage to heal, to unlearn, to rebuild, to get disciplined, to sit alone with your truth and stop lying to yourself about who you are and what you tolerate. Most people don't want freedom that badly. They want comfort, numbing, distraction, excuses dressed up like personality. But you wanted more, even when you were tired, even when you were scared, even when you were bleeding internally, even when life felt unfair, even when nobody understood your silence, even when every step forward felt like dragging chains through concrete. You still chose more. That is why you're different now, not perfect, different. And that difference came at a price. People love the glow, they love the strength, they love the confidence, they love the way you carry yourself now, they love the discipline, they love the aura, they love the power in your voice. But they don't always respect the process that made it. They didn't see the nights you questioned your worth. They didn't see you fighting the urge to give up. They didn't see you holding yourself together in public and falling apart in private. They didn't see you learning how to breathe through anxiety. They didn't see you forcing your mind to stop running back to people who hurt you. They didn't see you rebuilding your identity from pieces. They didn't see the grief of outgrowing the old version of yourself. They didn't see the loneliness that comes with elevation. Because elevation is lonely. Let's talk about that. When you start healing for real, not the fake social media version, not the trendy version, not the version where you say, I'm protecting my peace, but still answer messages that poison your spirit. When you really heal, you lose people. You lose fake friends, fake love, fake loyalty, fake support, fake community. You lose places that felt familiar, but were never safe. You lose habits that once comforted you, but were slowly killing you. You lose the need to explain yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. And for a while, that feels brutal. Because even toxic things can feel like home when that's all you've known. So when you walk away from chaos, there's a strange emptiness, a weird silence, a withdrawal, a shaking in your soul. Part of you misses what hurt you, not because it was good, but because it was familiar. That's the trap. A lot of people go back right there. Back to the chaos, back to the disrespect, back to the crumbs, back to the old identity, back to the cage, just because the cage is familiar. But you didn't. That's why they're angry. You didn't go back. You didn't die where they left you. You didn't let the heartbreak turn you into a permanent victim. You didn't build your whole personality around what happened to you. You didn't make your trauma your throne. You didn't let your pain become your excuse to stay weak. You felt it. You bled through it. You wrestled with it. You carried it. Then you turned it into fuel. That is rare. Do not let this world trick you into thinking that is normal. It is not normal to go through hell and come back with discipline. It is not normal to get betrayed and still protect your heart without hardening it into stone. It is not normal to be doubted, laughed at, overlooked, abandoned, and still build something beautiful out of your own wreckage. That is warrior behavior. And I know some people hate that word because it sounds dramatic. But what else do you call a person who gets hit from every angle and still refuses to stay on the floor? What else do you call someone who learned how to smile with pain in their bloodstream, who kept a vision alive while everything around them looked dead, who learned how to keep going with no guarantee, no applause, no backup, and no soft place to land? That's not luck. That's war. Internal war. The kind where nobody hears the screaming because it's happening behind your eyes. The kind where you have to drag your own mind away from cliffs nobody else can see. The kind where the battle is not just with people around you, but with voices inside you. Voices that say you're too late, too damaged, too much, too emotional, too broken, too different, too exhausted, too far gone. And yet here you are, still becoming. That alone is enough to make weak people resent you, because your survival destroys their favorite lie. The lie that says once life hits hard enough, you have no choice but to become bitter, lazy, self-destructive, cruel, or defeated. You are proof that pain can be transmuted, proof that grief can become depth, proof that betrayal can create discernment, proof that loneliness can create self-reliance, proof that rejection can redirect destiny, proof that suffering can forge standards, proof that pressure can create diamonds if the spirit refuses to crack. And yes, that sounds intense, because your life has been intense. You are not crazy for feeling things deeply. You are not dramatic for being changed by what you survived. You are not difficult for refusing to return to places that almost destroyed you. You are not arrogant for finally recognizing your value. You are not cold for having boundaries. You are not wrong for becoming selective. That's called learning. That's called growth. That's called wisdom paid for in blood. And the truth is, some people will never forgive you for becoming wise. Because wisdom can't be fooled by the same tricks twice. Once you see manipulation, you can't unsee it. Once you understand your worth, cheap treatment starts to feel insulting. Once you know peace, chaos stops looking exciting. Once you touch self-respect, begging becomes impossible. Once you remember who you are, shrinking becomes painful. That's why your whole energy changed. You stopped forcing, stopped chasing, stopped trying to drag dead connections into living seasons, stopped making excuses for disrespect, stopped proving yourself to people who had already decided not to see you clearly. You became still. And there is something terrifying about a person who becomes still after chaos. Because stillness after suffering is not weakness. It is control. It is someone who has suffered enough to know that not every battle deserves their blood. It is someone who has matured enough to recognize that peace is not passive. Peace is expensive. Peace is earned. Peace is defended. And now that you've tasted it, you protect it like your life depends on it. Because in some ways, it does. You know what it costs to lose yourself. You know what it feels like to abandon your own needs just to keep love around. You know what it feels like to be surrounded and still feel emotionally homeless. You know what it feels like to smile with a storm behind your eyes. You know what it feels like when nobody notices you are drowning because you look calm on the surface. So now you choose differently. You choose what nourishes you. You choose what aligns. You choose what respects your nervous system. You choose what doesn't force your spirit to live in survival mode. You choose people who don't make love feel like a test. You choose rooms where you don't have to amputate parts of yourself to belong. You choose work that builds you instead of draining your soul dry. You choose habits that sharpen you. You choose solitude over fake company. You choose truth over image. You choose discipline over dopamine. You choose long-term. So when you walk away from chaos, there's a strange emptiness, a weird silence, a withdrawal, a shaking in your soul. Part of you misses what hurt you, not because it was good, but because it was familiar. That's the trap. A lot of people go back right there, back to the chaos, back to the disrespect, back to the crumbs, back to the old identity, back to the cage, just because the cage is familiar. But you didn't. That's why they're angry. You didn't go back. You didn't die where they left you. You didn't let the heartbreak turn you into a permanent victim. You didn't build your whole personality around what happened to you. You didn't make your trauma your throne. You didn't let your pain become your excuse to stay weak. You felt it. You bled through it. You wrestled with it. You carried it. Then you turned it into fuel. That is rare. Do not let this world trick you into thinking that is normal. It is not normal to go through hell and come back with discipline. It is not normal to get betrayed and still protect your heart without hardening it into stone. It is not normal to be doubted, laughed at, overlooked, abandoned, and still build something beautiful out of your own wreckage. That is warrior behavior. And I know some people hate that word because it sounds dramatic. But what else do you call a person who gets hit from every angle and still refuses to stay on the floor? What else do you call someone who learned how to smile with pain in their bloodstream? Who kept a vision alive while everything around them looked dead? Who learned how to keep going with no guarantee, no applause, no backup, and no soft place to land? That's not luck. That's war. Internal war. The kind where nobody hears the screaming because it's happening behind your eyes. The kind where you have to drag your own mind away from cliffs nobody else can see. The kind where the battle is not just with people around you, but with voices inside you. Voices that say you're too late, too damaged, too much, too emotional, too broken, too different, too exhausted, too far gone. And yet here you are, still becoming. That alone is enough to make weak people resent you, because your survival destroys their favorite lie. The lie that says once life hits hard enough, you have no choice but to become bitter, lazy, self-destructive, cruel, or defeated. You are proof that pain can be transmuted, proof that grief can become depth, proof that betrayal can create discernment, proof that loneliness can create self-reliance, proof that rejection can redirect destiny, proof that suffering can forge standards, proof that pressure can create diamonds if the spirit refuses to crack. And yes, that sounds intense, because your life has been intense. You are not crazy for feeling things deeply. You are not dramatic for being changed by what you survived. You are not difficult for refusing to return to places that almost destroyed you. You are not arrogant for finally recognizing your value. You are not cold for having boundaries. You are not wrong for becoming selective. That's called learning. That's called growth. That's called wisdom paid for in blood. And the truth is, some people will never forgive you for becoming wise, because wisdom can't be fooled by the same tricks twice. Once you see manipulation, you can't unsee it. Once you understand your worth, cheap treatment starts to feel insulting. Once you know peace, chaos stops looking exciting. Once you touch self-respect, begging becomes impossible. Once you remember who you are, shrinking becomes painful. That's why your whole energy changed. You stopped forcing, stopped chasing, stopped trying to drag dead connections into living seasons, stopped making excuses for disrespect, stopped proving yourself to people who had already decided not to see you clearly. You became still, and there's something terrifying about a person who becomes still after chaos, because stillness after suffering is not weakness. It is control. It is someone who has suffered enough to know that not every battle deserves their blood. It is someone who has matured enough to recognize that peace is not passive. Peace is expensive. Peace is earned. Peace is defended. And now that you've tasted it, you protect it like your life depends on it. Because in some ways, it does. You know what it costs to lose yourself. You know what it feels like to abandon your own needs just to keep love around. You know what it feels like to be surrounded and still feel emotionally homeless. You know what it feels like to smile with a storm behind your eyes. You know what it feels like when nobody notices you are drowning because you look calm on the surface. So now you choose differently. You choose what nourishes you. You choose what aligns. You choose what respects your nervous system. Peace over temporary attention. That's why your life starts changing. Not overnight. Not in some cheesy movie montage way. Slowly, quietly, powerfully. Your eyes change first, then your posture, then your standards, then your circle, then your conversations, then your habits, then your destiny. Because destiny is not some random lightning bolt that falls out of the sky. A lot of the time, destiny is just what happens when a wounded person finally stops betraying themselves. Read that again in your soul. A lot of what people call luck is really just self-respect practiced consistently. It's leaving what drains you. It's saying no without guilt. It's staying disciplined when nobody's watching. It's working on your mind when excuses would feel easier. It's refusing to crawl back to things that almost buried you. That's power, real power, not loud power, not fake alpha nonsense, not attention-seeking noise. Real power is emotional regulation. Real power is restraint. Real power is discernment. Real power is being able to walk away even when your old wounds want you to stay. Real power is building a life that does not require your self-betrayal. And once you build that, people notice. Even the ones pretending not to. They notice how you don't react the same. How your silence feels heavier. How your standards became expensive. How your absence speaks louder now. How you no longer panic when somebody leaves. How you no longer beg. How you no longer explain your worth to people, determined to discount it. That kind of transformation cannot be faked. It has to be earned. And you earned it the hardest way possible. Through loss, through shame, through isolation, through rebuilding, through surviving nights that were trying to turn into your ending. But they didn't. You're still here. And not just here. Awake, sharper, deeper, more dangerous to anything fake, more resistant to manipulation, more loyal to your own spirit, more committed to your future than your past, more in tune with what is real, more unwilling to settle for what breaks you. So let them be angry. Let them gossip. Let them misunderstand. Let them call you distant because they can't call you accessible anymore. Let them call you cold because your boundaries made them feel the temperature drop. Let them say you changed. You did change. You had to. Because the old you was too available to people who never deserved you. The old you kept bleeding in places that only knew how to consume. The old you thought love meant endurance. The old you thought being needed was the same as being valued. The old you thought loyalty meant staying, no matter how badly it hurt. But now you know better. Now you know that some doors are meant to close forever. Some people are only lessons in human form. Some heartbreak is protection in disguise. Some endings are the beginning of your self-respect. Some loneliness is just the space required for rebirth. Some pain shows up not to destroy you, but to introduce you to the version of yourself that refuses to die. And once that version wakes up inside you, everything changes. Your walk changes. Your choices change. Your relationships change. Your standards change. Your future changes. Because now when life tries to break you, it meets somebody different. Not somebody untouched by pain. Not somebody innocent to darkness. Not somebody naive enough to think the world is fair. It meets somebody seasoned. Somebody who has already crawled through the wreckage and found a pulse. Somebody who knows what collapse feels like and still chooses construction. Somebody who has learned how to turn suffering into strategy. Somebody who no longer asks pain for permission to become powerful. That is who you are now. And that is exactly why they're angry. Because what destroyed them introduced you to yourself.